The dinner was at my mother's house, the same house where every family gathering turned into an unspoken competition. It was a Saturday evening in late April, just 2 weeks before my son Aiden's high school graduation. The table was full. My mother sat at the head, my brother David to her right, his wife beside him, and their 2 kids across the table. Aiden sat quietly near the end, picking at his food, saying very little. That was nothing new. Aiden had always been the quiet one. He was 18, lean, with dark hair that fell slightly over his forehead, and he had a habit of observing people before he ever said a word. Some people mistook that for shyness. Others called it awkwardness. My brother David called it weakness. David had always been the loud one in the family. He was 34, ran a small insurance firm, and carried himself like he had already won every room he ever walked into. He had a habit of steering conversations toward himself, and no one in the family ever pushed back. My mother loved him for it. She loved confidence even when it came dressed as arrogance. The conversation started normally enough. My mother asked about school, about plans after graduation. Aiden answered briefly. Yes, he had applied to universities. Yes, he had a few acceptances. He did not elaborate, and no one pressed him. Then David leaned back in his chair and looked at Aiden with that half smile he always wore when he was about to say something he thought was clever. So Aiden, David said loud enough for the whole table. You got a girlfriend yet, or are you still afraid to talk to girls? A few people laughed. Not hard, not cruelly, but in that way families do when someone says something they know is a joke but also know is not entirely a joke. Aiden looked up. He did not flush. He did not look away. He just said, "No, I don't have a girlfriend, Uncle David." David nodded like that confirmed something. The family failure, he said, raising his glass toward Aiden in a mock toast. Don't worry, kid. Not everyone can be a people person. My mother smiled. My brother's wife nudged him gently, but she was smiling too. My sister-in-law did not correct him. No one at that table corrected him. I watched Aiden's face. He did not react. He folded his napkin carefully, set it beside his plate, and said, "I think I'll head out. Thank you for dinner, Grandma." He kissed my mother on the cheek, nodded at the rest of the table, and walked out the front door without another word. I wanted to say something. I wanted to tell David that his idea of humor was cruel, that mocking a teenager in front of his family was not funny, that the boy had done nothing to deserve it. But I did not. I sat there and said nothing, and that silence is something I have carried with me ever since. After that dinner, I did not hear much from Aiden for a few weeks. He texted me short messages. He was busy, he said. Preparing for something. I assumed it was graduation related, maybe rehearsals or paperwork for the ceremony. I did not ask too many questions. He was 18. He was allowed to have his own space. What I did not know at the time was that Aiden had been working toward something for months. Not just weeks. Months. He had been elected student council president the previous fall, a fact he had mentioned exactly once in passing and then never brought up again. He was not the type to broadcast his achievements. He earned them, acknowledged them privately, and moved on. I knew he was involved in student activities, but I had no idea about the scope of it. He was also the captain and lead speaker of the school's competitive debate team. This was not a casual hobby. The team had qualified for the state championship that year, and Aiden had been their anchor speaker in every round. He had started on the team as a sophomore, sitting in the back of the room during practices, barely speaking. By junior year, the coach had moved him to the front. By senior year, opposing teams knew his name before the rounds even started. He had a gift for standing in front of a room full of strangers and making them listen, not through volume but through stillness, through precision. He could take a complex argument and break it down so clearly that even someone who disagreed with him found themselves nodding before they realized what had happened. His coach told me later that in 3 years of coaching, she had never seen a student handle pressure the way Aiden did. He simply did not let it in. But none of this was public knowledge to our family. I did not know about the debate team until weeks later. My mother did not know. David certainly did not know. Aiden had kept it all quiet, not out of false modesty, but because he simply did not see the need to perform his life for other people. The graduation ceremony was scheduled for a Thursday evening at the high school auditorium. It was a large school, nearly 400 graduates in the class, and the auditorium held close to 1,000 people. My mother had already claimed a row of seats near the front. David and his wife were coming. A few other extended family members had confirmed. I arrived early with my mother. The auditorium was filling up quickly, parents and siblings and grandparents settling into their seats with programs and phones and that particular restless energy that comes before a long ceremony. David arrived about 20 minutes before it started, his wife on his arm, looking bored but polite. "Big night for the family failure," David said as he sat down, grinning. My mother laughed quietly. I said nothing. The ceremony began with the usual speeches. The principal spoke about growth and opportunity. A local politician congratulated the class. It was standard, forgettable, the kind of ceremony people endure rather than enjoy. Then the program shifted. The vice principal stepped back to the microphone and introduced the next segment of the evening. There would be 2 student addresses before the diplomas were awarded. The first was from the outgoing student council president. The second was from a student selected by the faculty to deliver a closing address on behalf of the graduating class. Both speakers, the vice principal explained, were the same person. The name on the screen behind the stage appeared in plain text. It was Aidan's name. I watched David's face. He was reading the program in his lap. He looked up at the screen, then back down at the program as if trying to reconcile 2 different pieces of information. His wife leaned over and whispered something. He shook his head slightly. Aiden walked onto the stage. He was wearing the same kind of clothes he always wore. Dark pants, a simple button-down shirt, no tie. He looked calm. Not nervous, not performative, not trying to project anything other than what he already was. He stepped up to the microphone, adjusted it slightly, and looked out at the auditorium. The room quieted. He did not begin with a joke or a crowd pleaser. He began with a question. How many of you have been told at some point in your life that you are not enough? Pause. Not a dramatic one. A genuine one, as if he actually wanted people to sit with the question. Not in those exact words, maybe, but in smaller ways. Someone looked at you and decided before you ever opened your mouth what you were capable of. Someone told you that your interests did not matter. That your way of moving through the world was wrong. That you were too quiet, too strange, too slow, too much, or not enough of something. He paused again, and in that pause the auditorium was completely still. I have been told that my entire life, he said. And for a long time I believed it. He spoke for 12 minutes. Not a second more, not a second less. He talked about what it meant to grow up feeling invisible in your own family. He did not name anyone. He did not point fingers or call anyone out publicly. He spoke in general terms, but anyone who knew him, anyone who had watched him navigate family gatherings, understood exactly what he was referring to. He talked about finding his voice not through confrontation but through preparation. About learning that silence was not weakness but strategy. About discovering that the best response to someone who underestimates you is not anger. It is becoming undeniable. He talked about the debate team, about standing in front of judges and opponents who had every reason to dismiss him and choosing, every single time, to prove them wrong through the quality of his thinking rather than the volume of his reaction. He talked about what it meant to be the kind of person who does the work without needing anyone to see it, who earns things not for recognition but because the work itself is the point. And he finished with this. The people who told me I was not enough were not evil. They were just wrong. And the most powerful thing I ever learned was that I did not need their permission to find that out for myself. He stepped back from the microphone. He did not bow. He did not wave. He simply walked off the stage and back to his seat among the other graduates. The applause started slowly, the way it does when a room is still processing what it has just heard. Then it built. Within seconds, it was the loudest sound in that auditorium all evening. Parents were standing. Teachers were standing. It went on for nearly a full minute before the vice principal stepped back up to thank him and move the ceremony along. I turned to look at David. He was not clapping. He was sitting very still, his hands resting on his knees, staring at the stage. His wife was applauding, but he was not. His face was not angry or embarrassed exactly. It was something closer to recognition. The slow, uncomfortable kind that comes when you realize you have been measuring someone by the wrong standard for a very long time. My mother was crying. Not because she was proud, though she was. She was crying because she had sat at that dinner table and laughed. And now she was sitting in an auditorium watching her grandson tell an entire room of strangers that the people who were supposed to believe in him had failed him. And she knew without him ever saying her name that she was part of that failure. After the ceremony we waited in the lobby. Families were milling around, taking photos, congratulating graduates. Aiden came out in his cap and gown, looking tired but content. A few teachers stopped him on the way out. One of them, an older woman who taught American history, shook his hand and said something I could not hear. Aiden nodded and thanked her. When he reached us, my mother hugged him for a long time. She did not say anything about the speech at first. She just held him and said, "I am proud of you." Aiden hugged her back and said, "Thank you, Grandma." David stepped forward. He did not hug Aiden. He stood in front of him for a moment, and there was an awkwardness between them that had not existed before. Or rather, had existed all along but had never been acknowledged. "That was a good speech," David said. "Thank you," Aiden said. David nodded. He opened his mouth as if to say something else, then closed it. His wife put her hand on his arm and they walked toward the parking lot without another word. I drove Aiden home that night. We did not talk much on the way. He leaned his head against the window and watched the streetlights pass. About halfway home he said, "I wasn't trying to embarrass anyone." "I know," I said. "I just wanted to say what was true." "I know that too." He was quiet for another minute. Then he said, "Do you think he heard it?" I thought about David's face in that auditorium. The stillness. The recognition. "Yeah," I said. "I think he heard it." Aiden nodded and did not say anything else the rest of the way home. 2 days after the graduation, David called me. Not to talk about the ceremony, not directly. He called to ask if Aiden would be open to having coffee sometime. Just the two of them. No agenda, he said. He just wanted to talk. I told him I would pass the message along. Aiden, when I mentioned it, was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Sure. I'll do that." They met at a coffee shop the following Saturday. I do not know everything they said to each other. Aiden told me later that David apologized plainly and without excuses for the things he had said over the years, not just at that dinner but for all of it. He said he had spent a long time thinking of Aiden as someone who needed to be toughened up, and that he had mistaken cruelty for lessons. Aiden said he appreciated it. He said he did not hold a grudge. He said he had never been angry at David, not really. He had just been tired of being seen as something he was not. David listened. And for the first time in a long time he did not have a clever response. He just listened. That coffee lasted 2 hours. When Aiden came home afterward, he seemed lighter than I had seen him in months. Not because the wound had been healed entirely. Wounds like that take longer than one conversation. But because someone had finally acknowledged that the wound existed. And sometimes that is all it takes to begin.